Before we get to the meat of the program, it's time for IP in the news, one of my favorite segments for sure.
Okay, why don't you start?
I will do my best. So we all know, regular listeners of Passage to Profit who are really IP aficionados love the whole concept of inventorship. And, we just get so many cards and letters about inventorship every week. And so this was a recent non-decision by the Supreme Court. I'm sure you all know that you can file to have a case heard by the Supreme Court, but it doesn't always happen, right? And so in this case, the Supreme Court decided not to hear this case, and it was about some inventors at the Dana-Farber Cancer Institute who helped develop the cancer drug. And they were left off the patent by a company called Ono Pharmaceuticals. And of course, Dana-Farber sued Ono Pharmaceuticals to have the inventors placed on the patent. And of course, it worked out in Dana-Farber's favor. And so what happens a lot of times is you get into these inventor disputes because who invents on a patent controls who gets the money, right? So if Dana-Farber's inventors are erroneously omitted, then Dana-Farber doesn't get any money from the drug that Ono Pharmaceuticals is selling.
Well, they're lucky that Dana-Farber sued them now, because if they ever had to defend that patent in court, it could be invalidated because not all the inventors were on there, right?
That's right. Inventorship is really important in the US when it comes to patents. So,
and you actually helped somebody who was left off a patent.
I did, and he was a postdoc at Harvard University, and I shall say no more about it than that.
Okay. So it got to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court said, no, we're not interested in hearing this case. So it stands that the Dana-Farber people get to be on the patent.
Right, and so, Dana-Farber gets more money for their research.
So now on to our Wacky Patent.
Okay.
And this one actually, I mean, the idea behind this one is wonderful, but it shows.
You found this one.
I found this one. It shows a guy kneeling in front of a toilet.
Not that that's ever happened anywhere ever.
With this tube in his mouth, and the tube is going down into the toilet bowl and through the water and coming out the back end and into an airspace at the back of the toilet bowl.
Yeah, so for those of you who haven't disassembled your toilet lately, there is like a little bowl of water there, and then behind the bowl of water, there's a pipe that goes down to the sewer, right? And this guy's got a tube that goes under the water and into the sewer.
Isn't that what I just said?
Yes, well, anyway, I wanted to say it too.
So anyway, it's if let's say there's a fire and you're stuck in the bathroom. He said this is really good for hotels. Then you get breathable sewer air. So you have to breathe sewer air, but you don't die.
There's a charcoal
filter there. Yes. Somehow this has never caught on.
I don't know. I think I would rather die than breathe air out of a sewer gas.
Well, hopefully we never face that challenge. So anyway.
I just want to know, how did this guy experiment with this? Did he do it himself? Did he?
I think he made his kids do it.
Probably.
But anyway, so our next segment is Richard's Roundtable. So our guests this evening get to comment on what they've just heard or some other aspect of IP.
That's right. So Chandrella, welcome to the show. So good to see you. And do you have any questions or comments about what you just heard?
Well, I do want to know if you'd really rather die than actually just I'm hoping that you're joking about that. I think I'd go for the whole sewer thing and just suck it up. I would.
I don't know. Could you live knowing you did that? Now that's the only.
Well, the point is the living part is pretty key. And I think right now, in this day and age, I'd take anything to stay alive. So. But I do have a question, just in general. So as you all know, the Moderna vaccination is actually was founded by a Black woman, Dr. Lizzie Corbett, and she owns the patent on it. Yay! And I know, yay! And so humbled and excited about that experience for her at 35, like how remarkable. But I was just wondering, how does that work in terms of her patentship? So does she, because it is a government it could be a lame question, but I just am always fascinated by how are people compensated for that, or is it a legacy thing? And I only ask because obviously there was the historical matter of Bruce's Beach here in California, Manhattan Beach, that was originally owned by a Black family and then eventually taken away and now recently given back to them. And I know that it's worth a certain dollar amount, but what about all the money that has been garnered from that particular beach? Will the family be given that? So I guess my question is kind of twofold, just because I see now that Dr. Lizzie Corbett is the owner of the patent for Moderna vaccination. And I'm just fascinated to know, how would that happen? How does that work for the rest of her life?
Well, so that's a great question. And having been in the world of pharmaceuticals for a while, what usually happens is that when somebody gets hired by a company, they sign an employment agreement and they agree to transfer any inventions over to the possession of the company. So at this point, it was probably likely, I mean, obviously I'd have to actually look at the paperwork, but it's likely that Moderna owns the intellectual property. And then it's up to them to reward the inventors in an appropriate way. A lot of corporations, and this is kind of a special case, so we kind of hope that Moderna would do something special for the inventor.
I hope the Nobel Committee will.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, that's where it really shine, right?
Yeah. But that's how the system essentially works. And in this case, it wasn't you notice the case we talked about earlier, it was the companies, Ono Pharmaceutical and Dana-Farber, that were fighting it out, because the people that actually own the patents or invented the patents probably transferred their ownership to the companies, and they're the ones who are fighting about the money. So yeah, we hope that she gets a lot of recognition, and I'm sure her star is shining within the company. I'm sure she's hot scientific property. But
isn't that the vaccine you got? Didn't you get Moderna?
I did.
Yeah.
So I guess I owe her a big one. Thank you. So I don't, does that answer your question, or?
Yes, it does. Thank you very much. I just am curious, always curious. The other question I had was about Bruce's Beach. What happens to the intellectual property from the past? Does that particular family get the arrearages of what they should have really been granted for all of these, hundreds of years of not having the ownership, although they've discovered that they actually are the proper owners?
Well, so that comes down to, damages. And in that particular case, it's probably an equitable decision by the court. They'll look at the facts and circumstances and they'll say, are they owed compensation for that? And on the one hand, you could say they're the owners, but there'll be other factors that the court looks at too. So,
Okay.
yeah, but I would imagine that they would be entitled to some sort of compensation for having their property, wrongfully, taken from them. So.
Okay. So
Thank you very much.
You're so welcome.
Great questions.
Craig, what are your thoughts?
I want to go back to the toilet. Unfortunately, Elizabeth, when you showed us that picture, it looked like a self-portrait. I can remember from my earlier years, I've been in that position a lot.
I
think I needed that breathing tube because a lot of those times I was gasping for air, I guarantee. But I'm thinking maybe that person was a plumber, or maybe he knew a plumber to come up with that. I think it's a brilliant idea. And as I heard that, the connection that I made was, as possibly distasteful as that is, sometimes it's those distasteful things that we have to do to keep businesses alive. I know a lot of things in my entrepreneurship, it's like, gosh, I really don't want to do that. As a matter of fact, I even detest doing that. It's the job that I like to stay away from the most, and yet maybe that's the one that I need to spend the most time on. And so that connection came to me immediately beyond the self-portrait part.
That's a great comment.
Yeah,
great insight.
Very good. Amy, what are your thoughts?
Yeah. Well, so I have two questions. One, I want to know how long the tube is.
It looks
Like, genuinely.
The longer the
When do you
better. I
hit
don't know.
air? When does yeah, I'd love to know that. And then I get a question all the time, and maybe your viewers are interested in this, being in the food industry. I often get asked, did you patent your recipe? And as you know, you can't patent a recipe. You can trademark a recipe, but you can't patent. So like KFC holds their ingredients tight, Pepsi, Coca-Cola. So I was curious if you had any insight on that, on why you can't patent a recipe. You can probably maybe patent the proprietary process, but not the actual recipe. And I get asked that question all the time.
Oh, okay. Well, so did you go through a review with a intellectual property professional on your product, or?
I did.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, so here's my opinion. You obviously got maybe a slightly different one. Food products are patented all the time. We file, like the latest thing is the impossible meats. So we have a lot of people that are patenting new combinations of ingredients for meatless meat, right? To the extent that makes sense. So it is possible to do it. It's a business decision. Are you better off keeping the process and the ingredients a secret, so that Coke kept their formula as a trade secret for years and years and years and years. And they had that secret longer than they would have had a patent, right? So in some cases, it's better to keep it as a trade secret. In other cases, you can patent it. But there's no rule in the law that says you can't patent a recipe.
Oh, so. Interesting. Well, maybe I need a new patent lawyer.
Well, I mean,
well, thank you for clarifying that.
Yeah,
I've always been told it's a trade secret and hold it tight, but you can't actually patent a recipe. So I'm glad to get that clarity.
Well, the reason I
hope all the patents we've been getting granted in the food industry.
No, but the reason they want you to keep it a trade secret is because once the patent is published, everybody gets to see what you have. Absolutely. So if you're going to be making it for 50 years, you only have protection for the first 20 with the patent, right? So that's why they keep it a trade secret. Right?
And because usually you're publishing the list of ingredients on the package anyway for anything that's edible. So everybody already knows what's in it. They just don't.
Except for that really natural flavors. What is natural flavors? Yeah, my sister-in-law says cat hair is a condiment. Would that I don't know. Anyway. So Trevor, I'm sorry, did I answer all your questions?
You did. You gave me some clarity, and I'm gonna change my answer on that.
Okay. Well,
patent recipe, and I'm wrong.
Well, happy to help. So if it helps. So Trevor, what are your thoughts?
Well, I come from an interesting perspective. My father worked at Bell Labs, AT&T, for about 50 years and had about 11 patents, and signed all of them away for $1 to AT&T. And, I think it's, some of the patents are really interesting. The T1 line, which was the first digital transmission line that, powered the internet for many corporations, or Unix, which is the base operating system of many of the computers that run the internet. And so had really kind of very large impacts and got $1 for each one, right? And while that, seems unfair, it's up to the companies to recognize, those accomplishments. And I think, it's a shame to have somebody kind of removed from that history, because, that log, that history, I think is really important. And often trade groups will recognize the people who have furthered the field. So for example, my father actually won the Alexander Graham Bell Award and the NEC Award, and has an Institute of Electrical and Electronic Engineers Award named after him. And part of that is the recognition of the patents and the things that he brought to the table. So I think, it's upon companies to do the right thing, to recognize the people who build new IP, who change the world with their ideas, and to not, there's no point in taking credit for them, because the companies get the credit anyway in the form of revenues and profits and products. And, they want to encourage the types of inventors and intellectual mindset and curiosity that lead to the types of innovation that change the world. And so I think we should be fighting for the right standards to recognize the people involved in the patents in the process.
Yeah,
Absolutely. Because if you go to work for a company as an employee and you do something phenomenal like that, and they're just like, oh, well, then you're going to go somewhere else, right? And they're not going to be able to attract the great people.
right. I think that's a great point. So, yeah, I agree. I think the recognition comes. Lots of scientists are not supposed to be so interested in money. They're supposed to be interested in scientific truth.
Well,
And
they
then if
are,
you're not interested in that, you go start your own company if you want to make a lot of money. So
that is one sad thing, that scientists are not paid as much as entertainers in our society.
yeah, I know the
I don't
$1
like that
million
either.
per episode we're getting here at Passage to Profit has really been a game changer for us. So
Are you ready to take a quick break and then interview Chandrella?
I think that sounds like a great idea.
Okay. So you are listening to Passage to Profit, the Inventor Show on WOR 710, the Voice of New York. We'll be right back.